250 guests, and my father chose the moment between the best man's toast and the cake cutting to grab my arm. His fingers closed around my forearm, not hard enough to leave marks. He knew exactly how much pressure to use. He had watched Marcus do it for 5 years and learned nothing except the technique. "What are you doing here?" His voice hit the register that carries. "You embarrass me." Franklin Ashford straightened his tie. His suit was expensive and 10 years out of fashion, the way everything about my father was expensive and 10 years too late. "You embarrass this entire family. You think you belong at this table? You are nothing, Kayla. You have always been nothing. Get out before you make this worse than you already have." The ballroom at the Grandover Resort in Greensboro, North Carolina, is designed for moments like these, not the cruelty. The acoustics. Every word he said reached the table behind him, where my sister Camille's new in-laws sat with their champagne flutes frozen halfway to their mouths. It reached the table beyond that, where Caroline, my stepmother, sat with her leather planner open on the tablecloth, a pen in her hand, watching us the way she always watches things, like she is taking notes for later. I set my champagne glass down on the nearest table. My fingers were steady. I have had 5 years of practice keeping my hands still when a man raises his voice at me. "I came to say goodbye, Dad." He blinked. His grip loosened, not because the words moved him, but because they confused him, and Franklin Ashford does not know what to do with things he does not understand. He has never needed to. He has always had someone nearby to understand things for him. First my mother, then Caroline, then me. "Goodbye?" He said it like the word was in a language he did not speak. I did not explain. I pulled my arm free and turned toward the ballroom doors. The band had stopped between songs. The timing was so precise it almost felt planned, but it was not. It was just the kind of luck my family has always had. The wrong kind. The double doors were heavy. The brass handles were cold under my palms. I pushed them open and the sound of the ballroom collapsed behind me like someone had turned a dial. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses, and then nothing. Just the hum of the hotel lobby and my heels on marble. I sat down on a bench near the elevator bank. The leather was cool through my dress. I took my phone out of my clutch and scrolled to a saved contact. The initials read NK, Naomi Kessler. Senior Federal Prosecutor, Financial Crimes Division, Charlotte. I did not call her. I just looked at the name and confirmed it was still there. The way you check a parachute before you jump. Not because you doubt it, because the fall is real and you want to be certain. I had delivered the evidence file 11 days ago. 5 years of recordings. Financial documents I had photographed on Marcus's home office printer at 2 in the morning while he slept. Bank statements I had matched to shell companies. Wire transfers I had traced to my father's accounts. A recording of my stepmother saying words on a phone call that she believed no one would ever hear. 11 days. The federal investigation was active. The warrants were being prepared, and I had come to my sister's wedding in a navy dress with my hair pinned up because I wanted to stand in that room one last time and see them all exactly as they were. Not for closure, for confirmation. I wanted to see them performing the version of this family they had built on top of me, and I wanted to remember every detail. Because by Monday, every person in that ballroom would know what the Ashford family actually was. They just did not know it yet. I stood up from the bench. I walked to the valet stand and handed over my ticket. The night air hit my bare arms, and I noticed the absence of something. Not a sound, not a temperature, the absence of the grip. My father's fingers were not on my arm. Marcus's hands were not on my wrists. No one was holding me in place. The valet pulled my car around. A 6-year-old Honda Civic that Marcus called the embarrassment every time he saw it in the driveway. I got in. I closed the door. I adjusted the mirror and caught my own face in it. I looked exactly the same as I had when I arrived 3 hours ago. The same hazel brown eyes, the same chestnut hair pinned carefully away from my face, the same expression I have worn for 5 years. Neutral, patient. The face of a woman who is waiting for something, and the thing she's waiting for is almost here. Behind me, the wedding reception continued. The band started a new song. The cake was cut. Camille posted 3 photos before midnight. Caroline closed her leather planner and slipped it into her bag. Franklin ordered another drink and told the bartender a story about his real estate days that he has told so many times it no longer resembles anything that actually happened. No one came to the lobby to check on me. No one called. No one texted. Camille did not notice I had left until the next morning when she needed me to confirm the hotel checkout time. Even then, her message did not ask where I had gone. It said, "Can you call the front desk? They are being weird about the late checkout, and you are better at that stuff than I am." That is what I am to this family. The person who is better at the stuff no one else wants to do. The person who handles the details. The person who sits between the cousin and the wall and does not complain about it because complaining would make me difficult. That is the word they use. Difficult. As if everything I have survived in the last 12 years was an inconvenience I chose on purpose to make their lives harder. Caroline noticed I left. I know this because Caroline notices everything. She is 40 years old, and she has been noticing things about me since the day she married my father. When I was 17 and still sleeping in my dead mother's house and still believing that if I was good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, the people around me would eventually love me back. She noticed I left, and she did not follow me. She did not send Franklin after me. She did not text. She sat at her table with her planner and her crimson lipstick, and she watched the doors close behind me, the same way she has watched everything I have done for the last 10 years. With the patience of someone who believes she has already won. She had not won. She just did not know it yet. The drive home from Greensboro to Charlotte takes an hour and a half at night. I took the back roads. I did not turn on the radio. I let the silence fill the car, the way silence fills a room after someone has been hit. I should tell you how this started. Not the wedding, not the walk through the ballroom, the actual beginning. The first time I understood that my family saw me as something to be used. My mother died when I was 15. Ovarian cancer. The slow kind that lets you say goodbye, but makes you watch everything leave her body first. 2 years later, my father married Caroline. She was 30 years old, 13 years older than me. She had dark hair she wore blown out every single day, fitted dresses that looked like they cost more than my monthly allowance, and a lipstick shade she never changed. Tom Ford. Crimson. I remember the tube sitting on the bathroom counter the first morning she moved in, standing upright next to my mother's old soap dish that no one had thrown away yet. The lipstick looked like a little red soldier occupying territory. Caroline had no children. She never would. I did not learn why until years later, but I learned early that her inability to have a child of her own made her hungry for someone else's. She chose Camille, not me. Camille was older, more visible, more compliant in the ways Caroline valued. Camille let Caroline take her shopping. Let Caroline redo her bedroom. Let Caroline introduce her to people as my daughter at dinner parties, even though Caroline had only been in our lives for 6 months. I did not let Caroline do any of those things, and Caroline never forgave me for it. But I need to go further back than Caroline. Because Camille did not start when Caroline arrived. Camille started long before that. When we were children, before cancer, before any of this, Camille figured out something about me that she used for the rest of our lives. She figured out that I would rather take the blame than watch someone I loved be upset. She broke things and told our parents I did it. She borrowed my toys and returned them damaged and cried when I pointed it out, so I stopped pointing it out. She told our mother I had said cruel things I had never said, and when I denied it, Camille cried, and I was the one who apologized. She learned that tears were currency and that I would always pay. After our mother died, it got worse. Camille told me I needed to be strong for Dad. She said it gently, holding my hand, looking at me with those big wet eyes that made everyone want to protect her. Dad cannot handle both of us falling apart, Kay. You are the strong one. I need you to hold it together for me. So I did. I held it together while Camille collapsed. I made the lunches and cleaned the house and answered the phone when relatives called and sat with my father in the evenings when he drank too much and told me stories about my mother that he was already starting to edit. Camille went to therapy and posted about grief on social media and received hundreds of messages from people telling her how brave she was. She was not brave. She was performing. She had always been performing, but I did not see it yet. I was 15, and my mother was dead, and my sister was the only family member who still hugged me, so I believed her when she said she needed me. I did not understand that needing me and using me were the same thing in Camille's vocabulary. By the time Caroline arrived, Camille had already trained me. Caroline just gave the training a structure. And then came Marcus. I was 22. My mother had been dead for 7 years. I had finished college, was working as a junior accountant at a small firm in Charlotte, and I was living in a studio apartment that smelled like the laundromat downstairs. It was the happiest I had been since I was 14. My father called me on a Tuesday evening and asked me to come to the house. His voice had the tone it gets when he wants something but has not figured out how to frame it yet. The pitiful tone, the one where he sounds tired and slightly broken, like a man carrying a weight that is not his fault. My father has perfected this voice the way some people perfect a golf swing, through years of repetition and an audience that never challenges the form. I drove to the house. His office was on the second floor. Dark wood, leather chairs, a framed photograph of my mother on the bookshelf that he kept there, not because he missed her, but because visitors expected it. He sat behind the desk and poured himself a bourbon and poured me one without asking and slid it across the surface. I am in trouble, sweetheart. He owed $1.7 million, bad investments, over-leveraged properties, a development deal in South Charlotte that collapsed when the zoning commission rejected his permit application. He had borrowed against everything. The house, the business accounts, a line of credit he had taken out in my dead mother's name, which I did not learn about until 3 years later when I found the paperwork in a file Marcus kept. There is a man, my father said, Marcus Holt. He runs a lending company. He has offered to help, to restructure the debt, take over some of the properties. But he has a condition. My father looked at me, the way he always looks at me, when he is about to ask for something he knows he should not ask for, with that careful mixture of sadness and helplessness that makes you feel like refusing him would be an act of cruelty, like you would be kicking a man who is already on the ground. He wants to marry you, Kayla. The bourbon sat untouched in front of me. I could smell it. Sharp and sweet and wrong. He has seen you at the firm's holiday party. He thinks you are remarkable. My father cleared his throat. It would be a partnership, a good match. He is established. He is stable. I looked past my father, toward the window behind him. The glass reflected the room, and in it I could see the doorway. Caroline stood there. She was not speaking. She was not moving, but she was smiling. The kind of smile you make when something you planned is finally happening. I did not understand that smile then. I thought she was being supportive, encouraging even. It would be years before I understood what that smile meant. Caroline was watching the man who had rejected her receive a consolation prize she had handpicked. "Do I have a choice?" I asked. My father reached across the desk and took my hand. "You always have a choice, sweetheart, but think about your family. Think about what happens if I lose this house, if I lose everything." Upstairs, Camille was getting ready for a date. I could hear her music through the ceiling. She did not know about this conversation. She was 24, and she had never been asked to sacrifice anything, and she would not be asked tonight. I said yes. I said yes because I was 22 and my mother was dead and my father was crying and Caroline was smiling and my sister was upstairs listening to music, and I believe in a way that I can feel in my body even now that my job was to hold this family together. That if I said no, everything would fall apart and it would be my fault. That is what they had taught me, not in words. In the 1,000 small moments where I learned that my comfort was negotiable and theirs was not. The wedding was small, City Hall. Caroline wore a cream-colored dress. Camille was my maid of honor. My father gave me away. Marcus held my hand at the courthouse steps, and his grip was firm and warm, and I told myself it felt safe. It did not feel safe. It felt like a lock clicking shut. But I did not have the vocabulary for that yet. The first year was quiet. Marcus checked my phone once a week. He asked who I had lunch with and what we talked about. He opened my mail. He moved the money from our joint account into an account I did not have access to and told me it was for investment purposes. He chose what I wore to his firm's events, not directly. He would look at me when I came downstairs and say, "That is what you are wearing?" And I would go change. He never told me what to put on. He just told me what was wrong with everything I chose until I stopped choosing. The second year, he started touching me in ways that left marks. A shove into the kitchen counter because the chicken was dry, his hand around the back of my neck, pushing my face toward a spot on the bathroom mirror. "Clean it." My wrist twisted behind my back because I had answered a call from a college friend he did not approve of. He was jealous in a way I had never encountered before. Not the jealousy of a man who loves too much. The jealousy of a man who believes he owns something and is furious at the idea that it might have a thought he did not authorize. If a waiter smiled at me, Marcus would go silent in the car. He would not speak for 2 days. Then the explosion, a plate against the wall, my arm pinned to the mattress. Words that came out of him like something rotting had broken open. And then, after, tenderness. Flowers the next morning. A gift. A whispered apology. "I just love you so much, baby. You make me crazy." As if his violence was my achievement. As if I had earned it by being worth losing control over. I started keeping a journal in the second year. Handwritten. I bought a textbook on contract law from a used bookstore and hollowed out the center with a box cutter and hid the journal inside. Marcus never touched my bookshelf. He called it your boring paper collection. He did not know that my boring paper collection would become the foundation of his destruction. I wrote down everything. Dates, times, what he said, what he did, where the bruises were, how long they took to fade. I wrote in a kind of code at first, then stopped bothering. Marcus did not read. He did not look at my things. He did not believe I had a life worth examining. Camille called me during the third year, not to ask how I was, to ask for money. "Just a little help, Kay. My credit card is maxed and I have a networking event this weekend, and I need a new outfit. You know I would do the same for you." I sent the money because Camille had trained me to feel guilty for having anything she did not, and because saying no to Camille created a chain reaction. Camille would tell Caroline. Caroline would tell my father. My father would call me with a pitiful voice and ask me why I was making things difficult. The cost of sending Camille $300 was less than the cost of the phone calls that would follow if I did not. The money became regular. Rent help. Car payment, a medical emergency that turned out to be a spa weekend. I sent it all because I was married to a man whose accounts I could not access, working at a job Marcus ridiculed, and the only people who ever contacted me were the people who needed something from me. If I stopped giving, they would stop calling. And if they stopped calling, I would have no one. One night, during the fourth year, I was icing a bruise on my forearm. Marcus was in his home office with the door closed. I could hear his voice through the wall. He was on the phone. I pressed my ear to the hollow space between the studs and heard him say, "The debt is paid, Franklin. We are square. She is a bonus at this point." I went back to the kitchen. I sat down at the table. I opened the hollowed textbook and wrote that sentence in my journal, word for word. I underlined it twice. That was the night I stopped believing my father had done what he did because he had no choice. He had a choice. He made the transaction. And once the debt was paid, he kept me in the marriage anyway because Marcus's money was still flowing and my father's lifestyle depended on it. I told my father once. In person. At his house in Charlotte. I pulled up my sleeve and showed him a bruise on my upper arm. It had been there for 6 days. The edges were turning that sick yellow-green color that means the blood is being reabsorbed. Evidence of healing that looks worse than the original wound. My father looked at the bruise. His jaw tightened. He poured himself a drink. Then he did the thing he does. The sigh. The long, slow, practiced sigh of a man who wants you to know that your pain is a burden he is graciously choosing to carry. Every marriage has rough patches, sweetheart. I wish I could fix everything for you. You know I would if I could. He could. He could have picked up the phone. He could have called the police. He could have driven to Marcus's house and taken me home. He did none of those things. He changed the subject to a property he was trying to sell in Ballantyne. Caroline appeared from the hallway. She had been listening. She always listens. She brought me a cup of tea and sat down next to me and placed her hand over mine and said, "Marcus is a good provider, Kayla. Maybe you should try not to upset him." There was no surprise on her face, no shock at the bruise, no flicker of alarm. Because Caroline already knew. She had always known. She had known before the wedding. A woman Marcus dated before me had told Caroline about the bruises during a real estate closing years ago. Caroline filed the information and used it. She knew what Marcus was when she offered me to him. I drove home that evening. The next morning, Camille texted me. "Caroline told Dad you are being dramatic again. Just let it go, Kay. You know how Dad worries. Do not make it harder for him." I read the message 3 times. Each word was precision engineered. Do not make it harder for him. Not for me, not for Marcus, for Dad. Because in this family, the only person whose suffering matters is the person who built the machine that creates the suffering. My father sits at the center of everything, performing exhaustion, collecting sympathy, and every member of this family has been trained to protect him from the consequences of what he has done. I put the phone down. I did not reply to Camille. I did not call my father. I did not confront Caroline. I enrolled in a certified fraud examiner program that evening. I studied at night, after Marcus fell asleep, after the house went quiet and the only sound was the refrigerator humming and the occasional car passing on the street outside. I studied at the kitchen table with the textbook propped against the salt shaker and my notes hidden inside a folder labeled recipes that Marcus would never open because Marcus does not eat anything I cook without complaining about it first. I passed the exam on my first attempt. The certificate arrived in the mail on a Wednesday. Marcus got to it before I did. He stood in the kitchen holding the envelope, reading the credential, and he laughed. Not a mean laugh. Worse, a dismissive laugh. The laugh of a man who finds the idea of his wife having an accomplishment genuinely amusing. "You think you are going to catch criminals? You cannot even balance our checkbook." Within 3 months, I understood the entire structure of Holt Capital Group. The shell companies, the layered accounts, the way money moved from commercial lending clients into holding companies that existed only on paper, then out again into accounts that had no business receiving it. One of those accounts had a number I recognized. I had seen it before, 6 months earlier. At a family dinner at my father's house, Caroline had left a bank statement on the kitchen counter. It was Franklin's. I glanced at it while clearing the dishes. The account numbers stuck in my mind the way numbers do when you work with them every day. You do not try to memorize them. They just stay. Now I was looking at the same account number on a wire transfer from one of Marcus's shell companies. $47,000. Sent from an entity called Broad Creek Holdings to Franklin Ashford's personal bank account. Marcus was not just my husband. He was my father's business partner. The debt was not just a debt. It was an ongoing arrangement. My father was receiving money from Marcus's criminal enterprise in exchange for political connections and zoning introductions. And the marriage was the original transaction that started it all. I sat in Marcus's home office at 2 a.m. with his printer humming behind me and my phone in my hand, and I photographed everything. Every document in the folder, every page. I did not rush. I did not shake. I had spent 5 years learning how to be still when the situation required it. Marcus taught me that. He did not mean to, but he did. The next week, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Her name was Sandra Voss. Her office was in a building on Trade Street in Charlotte. She had a fern on her desk that was dying and a framed law degree from Wake Forest, and she looked at me the way people look at you when they can see the bruise you are hiding under your collar but are waiting for you to mention it first. I told her I wanted a divorce. She asked about assets. I told her about Marcus's company, about the accounts, about the money flowing to my father. She listened. Then she leaned forward. If you file for divorce now, his assets and debts are entangled with yours. If he is charged with financial crimes while you are still legally married, your assets could be seized too. Everything you have earned independently could be frozen alongside his. She recommended a legal separation, a firewall, a legal document that would formally separate my finances from Marcus's before anything detonated. I filed the separation papers 2 weeks later. I told Marcus I had visited a lawyer about some paperwork. He looked at me from across the kitchen holding a protein shake and said, "What kind of paperwork?" "Estate planning," I said. "Sanders said it was important to have things in order." He snorted. "Estate planning. What estate?" "Your Honda Civic." He turned back to his phone. The conversation was over. He did not ask a follow-up question. He did not check. He did not care enough to be curious, because Marcus has never believed that anything I do outside of this house has any significance at all. I called my father that evening to tell him I had seen a lawyer. I did not tell him why. I just said I was taking care of some paperwork. He listened for exactly 4 seconds and then said, "Kayla, please, stop being dramatic. You are always looking for problems where there are none. Can we just have 1 week where you do not create a crisis? 1 week without a crisis." That is what he wanted. 1 week where his youngest daughter did not remind him that the life he built was constructed on a foundation that was cracking. I stopped talking. I let him believe I had heard him. I let him believe his words had worked the way they always worked. The way they had worked on me since I was 15 and standing next to my mother's casket while he told me he was proud of how strong I was. I was not strong. I was just quiet, and no one in this family ever learned the difference. But I am learning something else now. I was learning that the system I lived inside was not broken. It had never been broken. It was built this way. Built on me. My silence was the foundation. My compliance was the mortar. My money, my time, my body, my willingness to absorb whatever they needed me to absorb so they could keep performing the version of the Ashford family they wanted the world to see. I could not fix a system that was working exactly as designed. I could not reform it from the inside. I could not love my way out of it or earn my way out of it or suffer my way through to some moment where they would finally see me and say, "Enough. We are sorry. You deserve better." That moment was never coming. It had never been coming. The only thing I could do was document it, build the case, protect my assets, and leave. So that is what I did. For 2 years, I lived 2 lives inside the same house. The first life was the one Marcus saw. The quiet wife. The second life happened between 2 and 4 in the morning. That was when I worked. Marcus slept like the dead after midnight. He took a sleeping pill most nights, a habit he picked up in his 30s that he did not know I had noticed and cataloged alongside everything else. By 1:30, his breathing would shift into that deep, mechanical rhythm, and I would slide out of bed and walk down the hallway in bare feet and close the door to my home office. The room he called your boring paper room. The room he never entered because it smelled like old books and printer toner and there was nothing in it that interested him. He was wrong about that. Behind the bookshelf on the far wall, I had built something. I slid the shelf forward on its felt pads and there it was. My forensic map. Handwritten on craft paper. Color-coded. Red for Marcus's shell companies. Blue for wire transfers. Green for the accounts that connected to my father, yellow for Caroline's involvement, every entry cross-referenced with a date and a document source. I had photographed over 400 pages from Marcus's home office printer over the course of 3 years. I had matched every luxury watch in his display case to a specific transaction. The Patek Philippe he bought in March of our 3rd year corresponded to a $200,000 wire transfer from Broad Creek Holdings to a zoning official in Mecklenburg County. The Rolex Daytona he bought the following September matched a payment to a construction firm that existed only on paper. Every time I dusted that glass case, I was reading a timeline of crimes. I also had the recordings. Marcus talked on speakerphone constantly. He paced his home office with the door half open, discussing things he believed no one in the house cared about or could understand. I recorded those calls on my phone from the hallway. I captured conversations with his accountant about restructuring fees. I captured conversations with my father about the arrangement. I captured a call with a business associate where Marcus described a payment to a county inspector as the cost of doing business in this town. And I had one recording that was worth more than all the others combined. But I will get to that. The point is, for 2 years, I built the case. Quietly. Methodically. The way I build everything. Not because I am naturally patient, but because I learned patience from the people who used me. They taught me to wait, to absorb, to be still when everything inside me was screaming. They taught me those things so they could keep using me. They did not realize they were training me to take them apart. Marcus started to notice in the 4th year, not the evidence, not the map behind the bookshelf. He noticed me, or rather, he noticed something about me that he could not name but that made him uneasy. I was calmer, less reactive. When he raised his voice, I did not tense the way I used to. When he grabbed my wrist, my pulse did not jump under his fingers. I had stopped performing fear for him, and he did not know why, but he could feel the absence of it the way you feel a draft from a window you cannot find. He started watching me, standing in the doorway of the kitchen when I was on the phone, walking past my office more often, asking questions that sounded casual but were not. What are you working on in there? Who are you talking to? Why is the light on so late? I had anticipated this. I had prepared a decoy. On my personal laptop, I created a folder labeled Work Research. Inside, I saved screenshots of publicly available business filings. The folder was designed to look like something worth hiding but ultimately be meaningless. A secret that was not a secret. Something Marcus could find and feel satisfied that he had discovered. He found it on a Thursday. I was in the shower. I had left the laptop on the kitchen counter, which I normally did not do. Marcus was in the kitchen making a protein shake. I heard the blender stop. Then silence. Then the sound of my laptop lid opening. I stood under the water and counted to 60. When I came out in my robe, Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop turned toward him, the folder open on the screen. What is this? A case I am working on at the firm. Corporate filings for a due diligence review. You are researching companies on your personal laptop? Sometimes I work from home. You know that. He did not believe me. He closed the laptop. He picked it up. He carried it out of the kitchen. Marcus, I need that for work. He kept walking. He went into the living room. I followed him. He stood in the center of the room, holding my laptop in both hands, the way he holds things when he is about to make a decision about them, the way he held my wrist that night in the 2nd year when he decided to twist it, the way he held the phone the night he told his business partner I was a quiet girl who does not ask questions. Then he threw my laptop against the kitchen island. The sound was sharp and structural. The screen cracked first. Then the casing split. Pieces of the keyboard scattered across the tile floor. A key landed near my bare foot. The letter K. I looked at it and thought, that is my initial. On the floor. In pieces. There is a metaphor in that, but I do not have time for metaphors right now. The real evidence was on an encrypted cloud drive I had set up using a work email Marcus did not know existed. The backup was on a USB drive hidden inside the hollowed-out textbook on my bookshelf. And the most complete copy of everything, every document, every recording, every photograph, every entry from the map behind the bookshelf had already been delivered to Naomi Kessler 2 weeks ago. Marcus shoved me backward. I caught myself on the counter. He walked out of the kitchen. I heard the front door open and close. His car started in the driveway. He was gone. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the remains of my laptop. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the proximity of the thing I had been building for 3 years to the man who thought he had just destroyed it. The next day, Caroline arrived. Marcus called me, she said. She sat down in the living room. Then she looked at me with the face she reserves for these moments, the concerned face, the soft voice, the performance of a mother who cares. He told me about the laptop, Kayla. I am worried about you. Are you having trouble at work? Are you sleeping? You look tired. I did look tired. I had been awake until 3 a.m, verifying that every file on the cloud drive was intact, but Caroline did not know that. Caroline thought I looked tired because I was falling apart, and that was exactly what I needed her to think. Maybe you should take a break, she said. Come stay with us for a while. Get some rest. Let Marcus cool down. I gave her what she came for. I played the role. I sat across from her and let my shoulders drop and let my voice go thin and told her I was just stressed from work, that the laptop thing was nothing, that Marcus overreacted, that I was fine. She left after 45 minutes. She walked to her car and took out her phone, and I watched from the window as she typed a message. I could not see the screen, but I knew who it was going to. Marcus. And I knew what it said because I had heard Caroline deliver this verdict before in different words about different situations, always with the same conclusion: Kayla is fine, just stressed, nothing to worry about. Everything was there. Every file, every recording, every photograph. The map behind the bookshelf was untouched. The USB drive inside the textbook was in place. The copy in Naomi Kessler's hands was the most complete version of all, and there was nothing Marcus or Caroline or my father or my sister could do to reach it. 3 weeks later, I drove 30 miles outside of Charlotte to a coffee shop I had never been to before. I chose it because it was far from Marcus's office, far from my father's house, far from any place where someone might recognize me. Naomi Kessler was already there when I arrived. She was sitting at a corner table with a laptop open in front of her and a coffee she had not touched. Sat down across from her. I put the USB drive on the table between us. It was small, black, unremarkable, the kind of object you could lose in a purse pocket and never notice. It contained 5 years of my life. "This is the backup," I said. "You already have the primary copy, but I want you to have this too. In case." "In case of what?" "In case he finds out before you are ready." Naomi picked up the drive and turned it over in her hand. She opened her laptop and inserted it and began clicking through the files. I watched her face as she read. She did not react the way civilians react to evidence. She did not gasp or widen her eyes or say, "Oh my God." She just read, steadily, systematically, the way I had built the case. I recognized something in her process that I recognized in myself, the patience of someone who has learned that the truth does not need decoration, it just needs documentation. After 20 minutes, she closed the laptop. "Kayla, this is substantial. The financial trail alone is enough to open a formal investigation. The recordings corroborate the paper trail. The wire transfers to your father's accounts establish a pattern." She paused. "But I need you to understand something. Once I file this, there is no going back. Warrants will be issued. Accounts will be frozen. People will be arrested. Your husband, possibly your father. This will become public. Your name will be attached to it. Your life, as it currently exists, will end." She was not being dramatic. She was being precise. I appreciated that. "I have been sure for 3 years," I said. "I was just waiting for you." I drove home alone. I took the highway this time. The drive was an hour. I passed the exit for Marcus's house and I kept driving. I did not plan to. My hand stayed on the wheel and my foot stayed on the gas, and the exit slid past me like a door I had decided not to open. I drove 3 more miles and took the next exit and found myself in the parking lot of a church, a small Baptist church with white clapboard siding and a gravel lot, and a sign out front that said, "All are welcome," in letters that were starting to peel. This was the church where I married Marcus. I did not go inside. I sat in the car with the engine running and the windows up, and I looked at the front doors. They were painted red. I remembered walking through them at 22, in a dress I had not chosen, holding my father's arm with Camille behind me, adjusting my veil and whispering, "You look beautiful, Kay," in a voice that meant, "I am glad this is happening to you and not to me." I thought about my mother. I thought about the woman she was before the cancer took her voice and her appetite and the light in her eyes. I thought about the last time she squeezed my hand in the hospice room, and whether she knew, even then, what my father would become without her, whether she knew what he would do with the daughter she left behind. I thought about the version of myself that walked through those red doors 5 years ago. That girl who believed she owed her family everything because they had lost someone, and she was the one who was supposed to hold what remained together. That girl who said yes because saying no felt like abandoning people she loved, even though those people had already abandoned her in every way that mattered. I turned the engine off. I sat in the quiet. I did not cry. I had stopped crying about this a long time ago. Crying is a request for comfort, and I had learned that no comfort was coming, so I stopped asking for it. I started the car. I pulled out of the gravel lot. I drove home. The meeting with Naomi was just the last piece, the moment when the thing I had been building left my hands and entered a system that would carry it forward whether I was ready or not. I was ready. I was ready. The question was never whether I could do this. The question was whether I could live with the quiet after it was done, with the absence of the people who had filled my life not with love but with noise, with the silence that comes when you stop holding a family together and discover that it was never together in the first place. I drove home. I parked in the driveway next to the Porsche. I went inside. Marcus was in the living room watching television. He did not ask where I had been. He did not look up. I walked past him to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator and stood there with the cold air on my face and my hand on the door, and I let myself feel for exactly 10 seconds the weight of what I had just set in motion. Then I closed the refrigerator. I made dinner. I set the table. I called Marcus to eat. He came to the kitchen and sat down and picked up his fork and said, "This is overcooked." "Sorry," I said. It was the last time I would ever apologize to him for anything. 2 weeks later, Camille's wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Ivory cardstock, gold lettering. Camille Ashford and Garrett Wren request the honor of your presence. The Grandover Resort, Greensboro, North Carolina. 250 guests. Black tie. I held the invitation in the kitchen, and I stared at it for a long time. I knew, from Naomi's timeline, that the federal warrants would be executed within days of the wedding. The investigation was moving. The machinery of the federal government is slow, but once it starts, it does not stop for sentiment. Camille had called me the week before to confirm I was coming, not to ask. To confirm. "You are coming, right?" "I need you there, Kay. I need my sister there." She said it the way she says everything she needs from me, like a request that is actually an instruction. Like my presence at her wedding was a service I owed her, the way I owed her the rent money and the car payments and the $300 for the medical emergency that turned out to be a spa weekend. I decided to go. Not for Camille, not for my father, not for Caroline, or Marcus, or Garrett, or any of the 250 people who would sit in that ballroom and lift their glasses to the Ashford family and see exactly what the Ashford family wanted them to see. I decided to go because I wanted to stand in that room one last time as the person they thought I was, the quiet one, the useful one, the one who sits between the cousin and the wall. I wanted to wear a navy dress and pin my hair up and hold a glass of champagne and look at every single one of them and know something they did not know. I wanted to say goodbye, not out loud, not in a way any of them would recognize, just for myself, because by Monday, none of them would ever look at me the same way again, and I wanted to remember their faces before they learned the truth. The version of Kayla Ashford who walked into that ballroom on Saturday night was the last version of me they would ever see. They just did not know it yet. But before I tell you about Monday, I need to tell you about the recording. The one that changed everything. The one that turned a financial crimes case into something personal enough to make a grown man play it 3 times in an empty room and then call a wife who would never answer his phone again. 8 months before the wedding, I was in Marcus's home office at 1:45 in the morning. He was asleep down the hall. The sleeping pill had done its work by midnight. I was standing at his printer, pulling a stack of wire transfer confirmations from the output tray when his phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up. The caller ID read CA, Caroline Ashford. I froze. Marcus's phone was face up on the desk, 6 inches from my left hand. The vibration pushed it half an inch across the surface. I watched it ring. Once. Twice. On the second ring, the call went to the speaker. Marcus had his phone set to auto speaker after 2 rings because he was the kind of man who believed every room should hear his conversations. It was a setting he had never changed because it had never inconvenienced him. It inconveniences him now. Caroline's voice filled the room. I pulled my own phone from my pocket and pressed record before she finished her first sentence. "Marcus, we need to talk about Kayla." Her voice was low. Not the soft maternal tone she used when she sat across from me with tea and concern. This was her real voice, the one underneath. The one I had suspected existed but had never heard with this much clarity. "She is getting too independent. She passed some kind of certification. She is spending more time in that office of hers. I do not like it." Marcus's voicemail did not pick up because the call had gone to the speaker. Caroline thought she was leaving a message. She was not. She was broadcasting into an empty room where the only audience was the woman she was talking about. Remember what I told Franklin when I introduced you to? She was always the expendable one. Camille was always the one who mattered. I picked Kayla for you because she was quiet and she would not fight and she would keep your house clean and your books balanced and she would never ever ask questions. There was a pause. Caroline took a breath. And then she said the sentence that would end her. You should have chosen me, Marcus, but at least I chose well for you. The voicemail should have been cut off. It did not. There was a beep, and then Marcus's phone switched from voicemail to a live connection. Somewhere between the pillow and the nightstand, Marcus had tapped the screen in his sleep. The call was live. Neither of them knew I was listening. Neither of them knew I was recording. Marcus's voice came through, groggy, half-conscious. Caroline? Oh, you were there. She did not miss a beat. Her voice shifted, recalibrated, but not fast enough. The recording already had what it needed. I was just checking in. About dinner next week. Franklin wanted to confirm. It is 2 a.m, Caroline. I know. I could not sleep. A pause. Then, lighter, as if she were trying to walk the conversation backward, you know me. I will never forget anything, Marcus. That is why this family still works. Marcus laughed. A sleepy, dismissive laugh. Caroline, that was a long time ago. What was it? Whatever you were talking about. Go to bed. The call lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I recorded every one of them. When it ended, I stood in the dark office with Marcus's printer humming behind me and my phone in my hand. And I played the recording back once with the volume turned down to almost nothing, my ear pressed against the speaker. She was always the expendable one. You should have chosen me, Marcus. I had known Caroline was the architect. I had known she connected Marcus to my father. I had known she was aware of the abuse. But until that moment, standing in the dark with the printer warm against my hip and the smell of toner in the air, I had not known why. Caroline did not arrange my marriage because it was convenient. She did not do it for money, although the money was part of it. She did it because she was in love with Marcus Holt. She had pursued him years before she married my father. She had wanted him, and he had rejected her, and she had spent every year since then building a life inside the family of the man she could not have, positioning herself as close to Marcus as possible by giving him something she controlled. Me. I was not just a transaction, I was punished. Caroline gave Marcus the daughter she could never have and the wife she could never be, and she watched from the other side of the dinner table while my life was dismantled, and she felt something that she would never admit to anyone. Satisfaction. Ownership. The particular cruelty of a woman who believes that if she cannot have something, she should at least get to decide who suffers in her place. I saved the recording to the cloud drive. I saved it to the USB. I labeled it with a date and a case reference number, and I filed it alongside 400 other pieces of evidence, and I went back to bed, and I lay next to Marcus in the dark, and I listened to him breathe, and I did not sleep for the rest of the night. That recording was the centerpiece. Naomi confirmed it when she reviewed the file. The financial evidence was enough for indictments. The recording was what would make it personal. What would make it public? What would make it impossible for anyone in my family to rewrite the story the way they had always rewritten it, with me as the difficult one, the dramatic one, the one who could not just be grateful. Now you know about the recording. Now I can tell you about Monday. I have already told you about the wedding, about my father's hand on my arm, about the champagne glass I set down on the table, about the walk through the ballroom, past every face, past Marcus, past Camille, past Caroline with her planner, about the lobby and the bench and the drive home. That was Saturday. Sunday was quiet. I spent it in my apartment. I had rented a small place on the south side of Charlotte 3 weeks earlier, using the salary from my firm that Marcus had never bothered to track because he did not consider it real money. I moved a suitcase and 2 boxes into the apartment on a Tuesday afternoon while Marcus was at work. He did not notice anything missing from the house because I did not take anything that belonged to the house. I took my clothes, my documents, my mother's blue-flowered teacup, and the hollowed-out textbook. Monday started at 7 a.m. I know this because Naomi called me at 7:04. Her voice was calm and professional, the way it always was. "It is happening," she said. "Warrants are being served now. I will update you when I can." She hung up. The call lasted 11 seconds. I sat on the floor of my empty apartment with my back against the wall and my phone in my lap, and I waited. At 7:15, two FBI agents approached Marcus Holt at the Charlotte Douglas International Airport. He was in the private terminal. He had a carry-on bag and a one-way ticket to Grand Cayman. Naomi told me this later. He was running. He had not told me he was leaving the country. He had not told anyone. He had simply packed a bag and driven to the airport and bought a ticket and believed that whatever was coming, he could outrun it with a first-class seat and a banking relationship in the Caribbean. The agents presented the warrant. Marcus asked to call his lawyer. They allowed it. By 9 in the morning, every account connected to Holt Capital Group was frozen. By 10, agents were inside the offices on South Tryon Street, carrying boxes of files past the reception desk where Marcus's secretary sat with her hands flat on her desk, not moving, not speaking, watching the building she had worked in for 6 years get taken apart folder by folder. They seized the watch collection at the house. I was not there for that, but I imagined it. The glass case is open, the Patek Philippe in an evidence bag, the Rolex Daytona in another. Each one tagged and cataloged and photographed, the way I had cataloged them in my map. Every watch he bought to celebrate a crime, now evidence of that crime. Every time I had dusted that case, I had been building the inventory for his prosecution. He just did not know it. Marcus called my phone at 11:14. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 11:17. Voicemail again. His voice on the second message was different from any voice I had heard from him in 5 years. Not angry, not loud, not the register that fills a room. Small, confused. The voice of a man who has been told that the ground beneath him is not ground. He called my father next. My father did not answer. My father did not answer because my father had his own problem. At 8:45 that morning, 2 agents arrived at Franklin Ashford's home in Charlotte. They presented a federal subpoena for financial records. I was not there for this either, but I have imagined it so many times that I can see it as clearly as if I had been standing in the hallway. My father's face, the way it would have cycled through the emotions he keeps behind the mask of the pitiful patriarch. Confusion first, then anger, because my father defaults to anger when he does not understand something, and then something I had never seen on his face in 27 years. Fear. Real fear. Not the performed exhaustion he uses to make people feel sorry for him. Actual fear of a consequence he cannot talk his way out of. Caroline was standing behind him in the hallway. She was gripping her leather planner, the planner she has carried every day for as long as I have known her. The planner where she writes her notes and her schedules and, as the federal agents would soon discover, her handwritten records of every payment Marcus made to Franklin, every arrangement she brokered, every dinner where the terms were discussed and the money was agreed upon. Caroline is meticulous. It is her greatest strength, and it became her confession. Every entry she made in that planner was evidence, written in her own hand, dated in her own ink. An agent asked to see the planner. Caroline said no. She pulled it against her chest like a child holding a toy she does not want to share. The agent told her it was named in the warrant. She still held on. They took it from her. Gently, I am told, professionally, but they took it. And then my father turned to Caroline, and he asked her the first honest question he had asked in 10 years. What did you do? Caroline did not answer his question. She walked past him into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water. She drank it standing at the sink, looking out the window at the backyard where my mother used to garden, and she did not say a word. That afternoon, Naomi's team released selected evidence to the Charlotte Observer as part of the public record filing. The financial documents, the wire transfer records, and the recording. Caroline's voice played for anyone with an internet connection. She was always the expendable one. You should have chosen me, Marcus, but at least I chose well for you. The article went live at 2:15 in the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, it was the most shared story on the Observer's website. By 6, local television had picked it up. By 8, the words expendable one were a phrase that half of Charlotte had heard and the other half would hear by morning. Franklin listened to the recording for the first time in his study, alone, I know this because the Observer article included a statement from his attorney that said Franklin Ashford was deeply disturbed by the allegations and is cooperating fully with the investigation. I know my father. Deeply disturbed means he played the recording and heard two things at once. He heard his wife confess to engineering his daughter's marriage, and he heard his wife tell another man that she wished she had married him instead. Both truths hit at the same time. Both truths demolished the same wall. He called Caroline. She did not answer. He called me. I did not answer. He sat in the study of the house where my mother died and where Caroline moved in 2 years later, and where I was told to marry a man who would spend 5 years putting bruises on my arms. And for the first time in 10 years, my father was alone. Monday evening, Camille called. She was supposed to be on her honeymoon, some resorts in the Bahamas. She and Garrett had flown out Sunday morning. The plan was 10 days, white sand, turquoise water, photographs for the Instagram feed. The beginning of the life Camille had always believed she deserved. The news reached her through her phone, a notification from the Observer app, then a text from a college friend, then another, then another. Then she read the article and she called me. I answered this one call. I do not know why. Maybe because she is my sister. Maybe because I wanted to hear what she would say. Maybe because some part of me, the part that held her hand at our mother's funeral and made her lunches when she was 17 and sent her $300 every time she asked, still wanted to believe she would say something different this time. Something that sounded like a sister instead of a person who has been taking from me since before she could spell my name. What did you do? The same question my father asked Caroline, the same words, the same tone. As if the Ashford family has a single vocabulary for the moment when someone refuses to keep the machine running. This was my wedding, Kayla. You ruined everything. My wedding, my day. Do you understand what you have done? I listened. I let her finish. I could hear the resort in the background, waves, music from a pool bar, the sounds of the vacation that was already over, even if Camille did not know it yet. Camille, I said, I did not ruin anything. I just stopped hiding what was already broken. She screamed, not words, just sound. The sound Camille makes when the world stops arranging itself around her comfort. I had heard that sound before. When we were children, she did not get what she wanted. When our mother was dying and the nurses paid more attention to the patient than to the older daughter crying in the doorway, it is the sound of a person who has never been told not to encounter the concept for the first time. I hung up. I set the phone on the floor next to me and I sat in my empty apartment and I listened to the silence that followed. Garrett, I learned later, was sitting next to Camille when she made the call. After she stopped screaming, after she threw the phone onto the hotel bed and collapsed into the chair by the window, Garrett picked up his own phone and opened the article and read it from beginning to end. He did not speak for a long time. He read about Marcus, about the shell companies, about the money flowing to Franklin, about the recording where Caroline called me the expendable one. He read about his own firm, Rand Calloway Partners, appearing in the federal subpoena, named as an entity that had unknowingly processed investments connected to Marcus's laundered funds. He read all of it. And when he was done, he set his phone down and looked at Camille, and he was quiet in the way that people are quiet when they are recalculating everything they thought they knew about the person sitting across from them. The honeymoon ended that night. They flew back the next morning. The resort charged them for the remaining 8 days. Camille put it on a credit card that would be declined within the week because the money behind it had always flowed from the same river, and that river had just been dammed. 2 weeks passed. I moved to Asheville. Not Charlotte, not Greensboro, not anywhere within the radius of the life I had lived for 27 years. Asheville, because it was far enough to be new and close enough that the mountains felt like a wall between who I had been and who I was becoming. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, clean white walls, a window that faced west, which meant the light came in late in the day and turned the empty room amber before it went dark. I had a bed. I had a bookshelf. On the bookshelf sat the hollowed-out textbook with the contract law title on the spine. The cavity inside was empty now. The journal was in evidence. The USB drive was with Naomi. The map was photographed and filed. The textbook was just a textbook again, a container that had held everything that mattered and was now holding nothing, and somehow that felt right, like the book, and I had the same job for a while, and now we were both done. I had taken a leave of absence from my firm. My supervisor, a woman named Diane, who had never once asked me about my personal life in 4 years, called me into her office the day after the Observer article ran and said, "Take whatever time you need. Your position will be here." She did not ask questions. She did not offer sympathy. She handed me a folder with the leave paperwork already filled out and a pen that worked on the first click. I signed it and walked out, and that was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in a very long time. The divorce was filed. Sandra Voss handled it. The legal separation I had filed months earlier did exactly what it was designed to do. My assets were firewalled. Everything Marcus owned was frozen by the federal government. The house, the Porsche, the accounts, the watch collection, each piece tagged and cataloged in an evidence room somewhere in Charlotte. Everything Kayla Ashford had earned independently, every paycheck from the firm, every dollar I had put into a savings account Marcus did not know about, was mine. Untouched, protected by the paperwork that Marcus had laughed at and my father had called dramatic. I read the news occasionally, not obsessively. I did not sit at my phone refreshing the Observer website every hour the way I thought I might. The compulsion to watch was there for the first few days, and then it faded, the way any habit fades when you remove the conditions that created it. I had spent 5 years watching, documenting, counting. I did not need to watch anymore, but I read enough to know what happened. Marcus was formally indicted on 11 counts: money laundering, wire fraud, bribery of public officials, tax evasion, and, based on the photographs I had taken of my own body over 5 years, the recordings of his voice during the worst nights, and the journal entries that matched each injury to a date and a cause, domestic assault. His attorney filed motions. The motions were denied. The evidence was too clean, too complete, too carefully built by a woman he had told could not balance a checkbook. His Porsche was seized. His house was seized. Holt Capital Group was shut down by federal order. The offices on South Tryon Street emptied and locked and marked with the kind of notice that tells the neighborhood something went wrong behind the polished glass. Marcus Holt, the man who believed that fear was the same as loyalty, and that silence meant submission, was sitting in a federal holding facility waiting for a trial he would not win. And the only phone calls he was making were to a lawyer who charged $400 an hour and had already told him the math was not in his favor. Franklin was not arrested. The evidence against him was substantial but indirect. He had received money from Marcus. He had provided political introductions and zoning connections. But he had been careful, in the way that weak men are sometimes careful, to keep his name off the documents that mattered most. He was named as a co-conspirator. He was subpoenaed. He was publicly exposed. The Charlotte Observer ran a follow-up profile 3 days after the initial story. The headline called him the father who sold his daughter to settle a debt. His country club revoked his membership. His former business partners released statements distancing themselves. A woman he had worked with for 15 years told a reporter, "I always thought Franklin was a decent man. I was wrong." The community now saw my father as exactly what he had called me at the wedding. Nothing. Not through prison. Not through handcuffs or a holding cell or a mugshot. Through the thing he feared more than any of that. Being seen. Being known. Having the story he told about himself replaced by the truth. And then there was the other thing. The thing the recording revealed had nothing to do with money or fraud or zoning permits. Franklin heard his wife tell another man she wished she had married him instead. He heard the woman he had trusted for 10 years confess that she had wanted Marcus all along and had settled for Franklin because Marcus would not have her. The man who believed he was the center of his own family discovered that he was a stepping stone, a consolation prize, a means to an end that had nothing to do with him. Caroline was not arrested either, but she was destroyed in the way she feared most. She lost control. The planner was in evidence, Every entry she had made, every note, every arrangement she had brokered between Marcus and Franklin was now public record. Franklin turned on her, not out of moral outrage. Franklin does not have the architecture for moral outrage, out of humiliation. He told his attorney that he had been manipulated by his wife, and his attorney told the press, and Caroline became the story within the story. The woman who could not have children of her own and stole someone else's. The woman who married for money and engineered a marriage out of jealousy. The woman who sat at dinner tables for 10 years watching her stepdaughters suffer and feeling something she would never admit to anyone. No one called her. No one visited. Franklin moved to a rental apartment and changed his phone number. The social circle that had once welcomed Caroline as the wife of Franklin Ashford now would not return her messages. She was alone in a house she did not own, surrounded by furniture she could not afford, holding a planner that had been photocopied and filed and published and used against her in every way she had used it against everyone else. She was more alone than I had ever been, and I had been very alone. Camille. I do not know what will happen to Camille. Garrett's firm was cleared. He cooperated fully with the investigation. His name was removed from the subpoena within 10 days. But the association lingered. His partners asked quiet questions. Clients hesitated. The Wren Calloway name, which Camille had spoken with such pride at the wedding, now carried a footnote that no amount of cooperation could fully erase. Camille herself was left with nothing she had not borrowed from someone else. The money from Franklin was frozen. The money from me was gone. The apartment, the car, the wedding itself, all of it had been funded by a system that ran on my silence, and my silence was over. For the first time in her life, my sister would have to build something without using another person as the foundation. Whether she could do that was a question I was no longer responsible for answering. She called me once more, 3 days after the first call. This time she did not scream. Her voice was flat, exhausted. She said, "Why did you not tell me?" I thought about that question for a long time before I answered. "Would you have believed me, Camille?" She did not say anything. I listened to her breathe. Then she hung up. That was the last conversation we have had. Naomi called me on a Thursday, 2 weeks after the warrants. Her voice was the same as always. Calm, measured, professional. She gave me the update. Marcus indicted. Garrett cleared. The investigation continued, but the primary targets were secured. Then she paused, and when she spoke again, there was something in her voice I had not heard before. Not warmth exactly. Recognition. Kayla, in 15 years of doing this work, I have never seen a civilian build a case this clean. The documentation, the cross-referencing, the way you connected the financial trail to the physical evidence. You could have been one of us. I thanked her. I meant it. She was the first person in a very long time who had seen my work and called it what it was. After the call, I sat on the floor of my apartment and I turned that sentence over in my mind. You could have been one of us. A federal prosecutor, a career built on taking apart the structures that people build to hide their crimes. It was a compliment, and I received it as one. But I did not want it. I wanted to be someone who never has to build a case against the people who were supposed to love her. That is all. That is the only thing I have ever wanted, and for the first time in 12 years, it felt possible. Then Naomi said one more thing before she hung up. We went through the planner, Caroline's planner. There was something in it that was not financial. A letter, handwritten, folded into the back pocket. It was addressed to you. My hands went still. Addressed to me? It is from your mother, Kayla. The handwriting matches a sample from probate records. It was written before she died. We do not know how it ended up in Caroline's planner, but based on the date, it was written approximately 3 months before her death. Caroline must have found it after she married your father and kept it. Naomi read me the letter over the phone. It was short, my mother's handwriting, which I have not seen in 12 years, on a piece of folded paper that had been sitting in a leather planner for a decade, hidden by a woman who understood that some truths are more dangerous than money. My mother wrote, Kayla, my baby girl, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I did not get to say what I needed to say. Your father loves the idea of family more than he loves his family. He will make choices after I am gone that look like love but are not. Protect yourself, baby girl. You are stronger than any of them know. And you are loved. You are so loved. Not by the people who will tell you they love you while asking you to carry them. By me. Always by me. I did not speak for a long time after Naomi finished reading. My mother knew, before the cancer took her voice, before Caroline existed, before Marcus, before any of it. My mother looked at my father and saw what he was, and she tried to warn me. And someone intercepted that warning and folded it into a leather planner and carried it around for 10 years like a trophy. Caroline kept my mother's letter the way she kept everything. As a tool, as insurance, as proof that she understood the family she had married into better than anyone else. She read my mother's words, and she did not give them to me because giving them to me would have armed me with the one thing Caroline could not control, the knowledge that someone had loved me without conditions, without transactions, without a price. I asked Naomi to send me a photograph of the letter. She did. I saved it to my phone. I have looked at it every night since. That evening, I opened a bottle of champagne. It was not expensive. I bought it at the grocery store on the corner near my apartment. I carried it home in a paper bag and set it on the kitchen counter and looked at it for a while before I opened it. The last time I held a glass of champagne, I was standing in a ballroom at the Grandover Resort with my father's fingers on my forearm and 250 people pretending they could not hear him call me nothing. I opened the bottle. The cork came out with a sound that filled the quiet apartment like a small announcement. I poured one glass. I carried it to the center of the room and I sat down on the floor. The apartment was still mostly empty. Just me. Kayla Ashford, sitting on the floor of a room that belonged to no one but me, holding a glass of champagne that no one had handed me and no one would take away. It was not the silence of a room where something bad had just happened. It was not the silence after a plate hits a wall or a phone call ends or a front door slams. It was the silence of a room where nothing was happening at all, where no one needs anything from me, where no one is performing, where the quiet is not the space between one wound and the next. It was just quiet, clean, mine. They called me Nothing. Turns out, Nothing was the only one paying attention.